Welcome, everyone. I'm Claudia Duran, Managing Director of Endeavor in Miami. We're so happy to have you with us this afternoon. It's going to be a fun ride. I'm sure you're going to enjoy it. As you all know, there has been a lot of talk regarding Miami, our entrepreneurial ecosystem, and the development of a new tech hub. We have also seen an increase in newcomers reallocating to the Magic City. And I know a lot of you are today here with us, so welcome to Miami. Our goal today is to highlight what our entrepreneurial ecosystem has to offer from the perspective of those in it, entrepreneurs, investors, and ecosystem leaders. By allowing locals to tell their stories, we want to make sure we don't create parallel ecosystems, one with newcomers and one with locals. So being able to continue to grow our ecosystem, welcoming all newcomers, and continuing to support our existing entrepreneurs will only help us to really achieve the entrepreneurial-led economy that we all want. And that is what Endeavor is all about. If you're just getting familiar with Endeavor for the first time, we're a global organization. We're present in 37 markets around the world. And our mission is to select, identify, support high-impact entrepreneurs with big ideas, incredible products and innovations that have capacity to really scale with the ultimate goal of catalyzing economic growth. So we're an entrepreneur-first organization, and we are mission-driven. So in that spirit, our first panel today will feature some of our local Endeavor entrepreneurs in our portfolio in Miami. So please join me in welcoming Felipe Sommer, co-founder of Nearpod, Joanna Micola, co-founder of Wincode and now BrainStation, and Richard Lamondine, co-founder of Ecosystems, for a conversation on their entrepreneurial journeys here in Miami and what it truly takes to scale a business in South Florida. So welcome, everyone, and thanks for joining us. I'm so excited to have you here with all of us. So let's get started. So I want to start first by giving, most of you already know, the recent big news. Joanna and Felipe, you both had very successful exits in the past 2 months. So it's very recent, congratulations. What can you tell us about that? Like, how do you feel? Do you want to start, Joanna?
I mean, the first word that comes to mind is wow and excited. I'm feeling pretty pumped up. I mean, it's quite the ride to go from, imagining this business you want to build, to growing it, to attracting interest for somebody wanting to buy your business, to now I'm staying on. I've joined their senior leadership team at BrainStation. It's an incredible company. So for me now, my next chapter is being part of this global organization. So for me, I'm super excited and ready to double down on South Florida and have an even greater impact, because obviously now I have way more resources than I did as a startup founder. So that's awesome.
That's awesome. How about you, Felipe?
So, Claudia, thank you for having me. As you could imagine, I'm super happy about the exit. I'm very, very proud of what we've built over the last 9 years. And I'm really excited about the future of Nearpod too, now in partnership with Renaissance. I think that the two companies together are going to be really good in terms of continue to inspire and engage students and teachers around the world. So happy for where we landed. Personally, I'm super excited for my next chapter, which I still don't know what it is. Take some time off. I want to be quite active in the ecosystem here in Miami, and excited to not have a lot of people to manage. So take some time off.
So the opposite of Joe.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were in the green room.
We were talking about that in the backstage. Yes.
Yeah, we were sharing that. I went from a team of, or being part of a team of 15 to a team of 400, and Felipe did the reverse. So
300 to 0.
Yeah.
Well, different challenges, different chapters in life. So good luck with that. So Richard, first tell the audience a bit about your company, Ecosystems. I'm curious, what have been the biggest challenges to scaling your company in South Florida? If you want to share some.
Well, before I begin, I'm a huge fanboy of Felipe and Joe. So, I've given you my congrats privately, so here it is publicly. So I am the co-founder and CEO of Ecosystems. We are a water and energy conservation company. We work mostly with large real estate portfolios, usually older buildings, and bring them up to 21st century efficiency standards. So we're a little bit different. This is a Miami tech call. I wouldn't necessarily classify us as tech. And I think that's a strength of Miami that I can be in this type of conversation, quite frankly. But as an impact, we have saved over 3 billion gallons of fresh water. We've saved over 100,000 tons of CO2, metric tons from entering the atmosphere. And basically, our mission is to prove that conservation is good for business. In terms of scaling my company, there's two ways I'd break it up: early days and then after. I started the company in 2012. There was very, very little here at the time. So in terms of support for founders, Endeavor wasn't on the ground yet. Venture Cafe and a lot of other things weren't happening. And so I felt like I was on an island in the early days. But I think that seeing what's come from then until now and seeing what's happening now has been really exciting. Now, scaling a company here as an environmental company honestly hasn't been the easiest. South Florida is a little bit different, but Florida in general is not the most environmentally friendly state, and we are an environmental company. And so, but I've felt that's been a strength. While a lot of our competitors have had to rely on public rebates and grants, we've built our model based purely on something our customers want to buy. And on top of that, we have definitely had to go national in our approach, because the Miami market, in terms of what we were doing, wasn't large enough, which I think is a good thing also, right? We had to take the challenge and make it a strength. So we've worked in over 29 states, 176-ish cities. My marketing might check me on that number, but overall, we've had to pull talent from all over the country to meet our needs, and I think that's definitely been the biggest challenge for us in scaling.
Mm-hmm. Okay, very interesting. How about you, Joe or Felipe? Do you encounter any similar challenges or different challenges that you would like to share?
Well,
or how do you overcame the challenges?
Oh, I mean, I think we paused because there's so many challenges that you face. It's kind of like trying to decide which ones you're going to speak to. I guess I would say, having been acquired now, I guess I have a little bit of hindsight. So when I think back, I think there's two things that come to mind. One, I think that there were times early on where I thought resources like access to capital or having like a crazy runway of money to do all the things was a challenge. But now that I'm at that stage and having really like MVP bootstrapped, I see that really wasn't a challenge, and it actually got us to where we are right now. Mm-hmm. I would say personally, some of the challenges I faced was, hiring was a big one. And I don't mean like that there weren't people to hire, because I know that's an ongoing conversation. I mean, how do you hire well, right? And so there's a lot of people have probably heard the concept of, fire fast, hire slow. And I would say we learned that. And to some degree, when you start a startup, you have to hire fast no matter what, because it depends like what growth stage you're at. And so for me, it was a process of like really doubling down on what does it mean to hire good people? How do you identify them? How do you identify like what are the capabilities and qualities you want on your team? And then for us as a team, not only me in a leadership role, but how those who are in leadership roles, how do we then train everyone to be a manager? I hate using that word because it sounds a little bland, but to be a leader, to inspire others as well. And so I would say that was a challenge early days that we were able to overcome, which was a great learning. I mean, it was a good ride.
Yeah.
Continues to be.
Right. And Felipe, how about you? I know you scale your business to 300 employees here locally. Wow. So how was that?
So when we talk about challenges in a startup, I mean, I want to dissociate that from the region or where we are. I mean, there are challenges that are inherent to just growing a business. In our case, I think execution was the biggest challenge that we always had. We sort of were convinced of the product, of the strategy, the problem we were solving. Executing that as you grow, that was the main challenge. in terms of specifically South Florida, and this is something that many people talk about, there are some resources that are not as widely available as in other regions. I mean, product marketing, but I think that there was a huge leap in terms of availability of resources and the whole startup ecosystem here. From Richard, we started in 2012 as well. And capital was a really hard deal at the time. Now it's much less. So I'm super bullish on South Florida in general.
Great.
I would say a funny challenge for me being a Finnish Canadian, where in Finland, if you're 10 minutes late, if you're 10 minutes early, you're 10 minutes late is the saying. I would say the challenge for us was, adopting to a little bit of Miami time, although we didn't experience it that much. But what I mean to say there was a transition to adopting the way of how things function in South Florida. And in the beginning, it was a transition. Maybe I would call it a challenge. I wouldn't really. I would say we came to embrace it and love it. And I think that's also what powered us to be great, which is to really embed in the fabric of this ecosystem.
Definitely.
What's the Miami version of 10 minutes early, 10 minutes late?
What is it? On time.
On time. You're polite. Good.
I think one last thing to add too is that so Felipe and I both started in 2012. We didn't meet till our Endeavor selection panel in 18 or 17, Felipe? I forget.
17, I think.
Yeah. So, there was a lot of the founders doing a lot of great work. I mean, Joe and I did meet similar time frame, I think. And so we used to be a lot more siloed, I think, than we are now. And I think that's a huge credit to the ecosystem, pun intended, in general.
Yeah, and that's why we all exist here, to connect all of you and create this incredible entrepreneurial ecosystem, right? More than ever, it's very needed. So our role is to connect entrepreneurs. So how would you all describe your approach to growth? Like slow and steady, fast and furious? Let's start with you, Richard.
So I think it depends on what stage of our company we've been in, right? I'd say we were forced into being slow and steady early, right? And then from about 2016 to early 2020, we were fast and furious. And then we grew quick enough where a lot of things internally broke, and I kind of got back in love with a little bit of a slower and steadier growth. So I think it's not a one or the other. It's where you are. Yeah, you're just surfing the waves. I could tell you that I'm trying to gear our team up for another fast and furious run. Now that we've managed to handle COVID, we work a lot in people's homes, so this has been a tough year for us. But yeah, it just depends.
Okay, great. And how about you, Felipe? I know last year was a
yeah, I would say, if you give me those two options, would be fast and furious. We've always been growing, at a huge pace, except for 1 year probably, but we've been doubling in most metrics year over year. And I think that the key challenge there is how you balance, there's some things at the beginning, you don't have a price list, you don't have processes, right? And you do everything super scrappy. And then as you start growing and the company is bigger and bigger, you start inserting those processes and those controls. So keeping the same culture with a bigger size, it's somewhat of a challenge. I think we manage it pretty well. Although, for somebody like me, I found myself frustrated sometimes with the fact that we need to meet some things along the way that I usually would like to do. But overall, I think it's fast and furious.
Okay, great. How about you, Joe?
Well, initially I was instinctively going to say slow and steady, but then I started thinking about what, the phases of growth, like you guys were both saying. And I would say early days, it was fast and furious. I remember our early pitch decks when we first raised capital, they always want to know, what's your, what have been the percentage increase year over year. And there were some crazy numbers the first few years, because ultimately, that really, those big growth numbers was also because we started small. So, but it looked great on a pitch deck. So I will say, slow and steady. Since we were very much bootstrapping it and growing organically, we were definitely trying things. So we trialed things, but it was definitely a steadier, slower trial of like higher growth ideas, simply because of how we were capitalized. So slow and steady is what my final answer.
Okay, cool. So as you all know, Endeavor's backbone is our mentor network, right? Our advisors, our mentors who support all of you. You three are all Endeavor entrepreneurs. So what role has mentorship played in your entrepreneurial journey? Who wants to go first?
I'll go first. So, so there are two angles to that question. One is myself mentoring others and being mentored. When I think about the mentors that I had at Endeavor that were super useful in the latest part of the journey, I mean, Ernest Bachrach was key. I had a very interesting conversation with him, and I'm always thankful of his advice. William Lautman is another person from Endeavor that helped me a lot, and we had very interesting conversations about board dynamics and how to sort of think about an exit, etc. So very, very pleased with that in that capacity with the Endeavor Mentorship Network. I also enjoyed very much so mentoring others and being introduced to other companies. So thank you, Claudia. Thank you, Juan Pablo, for the opportunities to meet other people and have interesting conversations.
Yeah, and Endeavor is a lot about paying it forward. So for most of the entrepreneurs, we usually invite them to be speakers and mentors for other entrepreneurs, specifically in our accelerator program. So again, that's something we pride a lot in engaging entrepreneurs and paying it forward. Yeah.
Felipe, you can be my mentor anytime if it involves alcohol.
Yeah, ditto.
Let's go to a fancy place for dinner, and I'll tell you some secrets.
Yeah.
Good.
I would say so. We're fully bootstrapped still, and so we have no investors, and so we don't actually have like an official board of directors. And so for us, we've really leveraged the advisory board from Endeavor as a way to sort of simulate and have outside folks challenge our assumptions. You know, we talk slow and steady, fast and furious. We had an advisory board meeting last month where they told me to go slower and steadier. So there goes the old wise men, right? So so for me, that's been big. And then there's been one-off challenges we face. We all do it, whether it's with people or with systems, like you mentioned, Felipe, and just I think being able to reach out to the Endeavor network and be like, hey, I'm dealing with this problem. Do you have a mentor? Has been a pretty big asset for us personally.
Yeah. Great.
Yeah, and I would say, well, first and foremost, huge thanks to Endeavor. I mean, my simple answer is our successful acquisition is a result of our Endeavor advisory board and the mentors who we've worked with over the years. They are embedded into everything we've done in WinCode since we became Endeavor entrepreneurs in 2015. I can't tell you the pitfalls we navigated and didn't get stuck in, because we didn't get stuck in them because we had the mentors that we had. So, just a huge shout out to our Endeavor advisory board that we had for WinCode and continue to be very close with. They were just so extraordinary. And I love each and every one of you so much. You know who you are. And I guess what I would say is it's really hard. Like a lot of people ask me now, like, how do I get a mentor? Where do I find a mentor? And I always found early days that it's really hard, like to ask someone, will you be my mentor? And then you feel a little bit embarrassed, like what are the right questions to ask a mentor? Am I worthy of having a mentor? And so one of the great gifts that Endeavor gave us was a structure and a pathway to force us in a room with mentors and be like, ask them anything you need to ask them. And if you don't know what to ask, here's some suggestions. So it's been amazing. I mean, we wouldn't be where we are today. And so I'm so grateful. And I just so much gratefulness. It's amazing to have mentors like we do. And also the network, even now, like with some of the stuff we're navigating at the global level, like a majority of the people we've leaned on are all in the Endeavor network, even now today. So that's been amazing.
Yeah, and that's the power of a network. I mean, you tap into incredible people who are willing to support you with their experiences. You don't have to navigate things alone. So yeah, that's great. So we will be hearing more about investors in our later panel, but I wanted to talk a little bit about fundraising. Some of you went through that process. Do you want to share some of that experience for other entrepreneurs that are watching you?
Felipe, the veteran, come on. Tell me.
So let's see. I feel that, I mean, quite honored that we've gone through all stages of fundraising. So we did friends and family. We did a seed round with impact investors. We did a Series A with VCs. We did a Series B with private equity, and now we have this exit, right? So, I mean, my experience has been really good in terms of, I mean, I got along with all of the investors at every point along the way. And I think that, I mean, I learned a lot, and I will apply those learnings for eventually a new company. So, I mean, quite excited about all of the stages. They're all different, and you need to look for different things. But it was a really great experience for me.
Okay. Yeah, I would say, so we ended up, so I guess we raised twice, and then the third would have been the acquisition. And man, I always think like, you know, I read so much about like negotiating and deal making, and you talk to mentors about it a lot. And, you know, Felipe, you mentioned Ernest. I'm always like blown away how he sees, like, I see like 2 levels of a deal and he sees like 100. And he, not only is he super smart and funny guy, but he's also experienced. And so I guess what I would say is in deal making, like you just can't learn it until you're in it. And I think that's one of the things, like you can read and talk to people, but there is a human element to negotiating. And there are some things that are going to get to you and some things that don't, and you're going to be focused on some things and the other side isn't. And it's just, it's great to have a sounding board so that when you are going through that process, you can kind of like QA yourself. Like, am I getting stuck on this is this worth getting stuck on? Like, if I get stuck on that, how is that going to impact the deal as a whole? And then the other thing I would say is we raised early on, and I guess in hindsight, what I would say is it was very exciting, and I feel like we did it because that was the thing to do. We had gotten to a certain like level of company or size of revenue, and we're like, okay, the next thing is to raise money. And in hindsight, I guess what I would say is I don't know if we actually really needed to do that first raise. We probably didn't. I think we just wanted to go through that process, learn it, say we did. Because what I would say is that infusion of capital didn't necessarily like tip the scale so much. Like we did the things we were going to do anyway. Yeah. So I would always say is like, try not to rush into it. The best advice I ever got was try and never raise money when you really need it. Try to raise money when you don't need it, because it's going to give you a bit more peace of mind and you're not going to feel rushed into it. And a lot of times when you're in the midst of a deal, the momentum can take you over and you might like go with the flow when really you should be swimming upstream.
Yeah, that's great advice.
Yeah, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head for me in the way I think, which is you definitely get to that point in size where it's like, whoa, are you thinking about raising money? It's like, for us, it's been like, we don't really have to. And it's kind of been, it's almost been expected when I've come to realize and seeing and talking to folks like you and Felipe, that it's just a tool, right? If you need the tool, you go out and you use the tool. Yeah. If you don't need the tool, you don't use the tool. And too often, I think it becomes an expected part of the process when it really is dependent. I mean, Felipe, your product, obviously you couldn't go out there and like have the revenue generation to cover that. But for us, we're project-based and we can.
Yes.
For us, yeah.
Keep bootstrapping, don't raise money.
That's what people tell me. But, you know, at the same time, I could use some extra resources. So, but at the same time, if anyone in this audience is starting a company, it is a tougher road financially in that I personally needed a side hustle to keep the doors open for a number of years before we hit our quote unquote inflection point where I could see this paying my bills fully. So there is a trade-off. Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. So Joe, I remember your story about moving to Miami from, is it Finland? Mm-hmm. And so I just curious if you want to share with everyone, and I know Felipe from Argentina, and then you both chose Miami as your hometown. Do you want to just share why Miami for all
Yeah,
those?
of course. So originally from Finland, but moved here from Toronto, and Miami we really wanted to go somewhere where we could be part of building something from the ground up, be part of the foundation of an ecosystem. And we wanted to have a really big positive social impact in terms of empowering people to launch careers in technology, which we're continuing to do at BrainStation. And Miami represented that. We looked at a few other cities. We actually looked at LA and Austin. And believe it or not, in 2013, there were no code schools in LA. Now there's like 20, because everyone's like, what? LA must have had like coding boot camps and product design boot camps. No one was there yet. Snapchat wasn't there yet, if that's even a thing anymore. So we looked at Miami, and Miami represented the largest gap between number of open technology positions and those in the market qualified for those positions. So we were like, wow, that's going to give us a huge opportunity to, one, be first to market, and two, we're really community and people oriented, and BrainStation and WinCode both are as well. And so that it just felt like the perfect fit. And we came in, and we didn't know this at the time, but in the first 5 meetings that we had while we still lived in Toronto, Matt Hagman at Knight Foundation, of course, everyone knows Matt. We met with Susan Amat at Venture Hive. We met with the folks, Ernie and Rebecca at Code for Miami. We met with the founders of Lab Miami, and they just told us their vision and what they were planning to do and what the opportunity was here. And we were in, and they were so open and collaborative, supportive, also like gave us some critique in terms of where we had to go to make it successful in this market. And it has continued to be so open and supportive and collaborative. Endeavor is an amazing part of that. And Endeavor is actually one of the reasons when Endeavor had announced that they were opening back in 2013, that they would open in 2014. So we also saw that as a really great sign. We didn't know at the time we'd be joining Endeavor. So yeah, I think South Florida is a place where you can be anyone you want to be, and you can, it's a little bit like the Wild West still, and that creates so much opportunity to do great things. And there are some really great people in the startup innovation and tech ecosystem here. So that's ultimately why we chose it.
Okay. And we'll talk a little bit more in our next panel with our ecosystem builder partners. Yeah. So
my decision was way less data driven compared to Joanna. So I used to live in San Francisco before moving here, and I basically moved here for 2 reasons. I wanted to start a business that was related to Latin America, and I thought this was a good place to do that. And second, because my family moved from Argentina to Miami, so I found this the perfect place, way more affordable than San Francisco at the time. But then when a few years later, when I studied Nearpod, it proved to be a great location for an education company. So Miami-Dade County Public Schools is the 4th largest district in the U.S. Broward is the 5th, and Palm Beach is the 7th. So, and a lot of high-profile private schools who were a great lab for us to test things at the beginning, like the Pinecrest and the American Heritage and the La Salle. So, and the availability of good human resources and affordable ones in terms of the go-to-market, like sales, customer success, were things that were really helpful for us to develop the company here. And even so, that at some point we had opened an office in San Francisco that we decided to shut down and move folks from San Francisco to Miami to consolidate operations here. So Miami was very, very helpful along the way for my company.
great. And Richard, being a local Miamian.
I was going to say, I'd like to, as the, I guess, spokesman of the born and raised Miamians here, for me, it was, I'd seen this place grow from literally like what seemed like a tourist village to a proper metropolis. So it was never really a choice. I left for 6 years living in LA and then China, but I'd always felt the pull of the gravity back here. So, and actually I think one of my personal goals in this sort of people moving to Miami movement is to try to get all those folks that I grew up with that we lost to other cities back here. So actually putting my heads together with, for example, like Kevin Ruiz from the DDA saying, hey man, like let's focus on, not just, attracting the folks from elsewhere, but how about the Miamians that actually want to come back? A lot of people want to come back here. Yeah. So and they've done a good job. And in terms of attracting folks, now we need to, as we do this panel, make sure they join our train, right?
Yeah, and that's a great segue to my next question. I mean, talking about the future and fast forwarding. So how do you see the Miami entrepreneurial and Miami tech ecosystem developing in the next, let's say, 2 to 5 years? Because you've seen it from like 2012, where there was not that much, and now where we are. What do you see?
So I definitely think it's come a long way. I would, as I explained to our company, I would like to put in a request to change the movement from Miami Tech to Miami Innovation or Miami Entrepreneurship, because we are not, I'll reiterate, a traditional tech company. So I'd like to, and Miami's great. We have a lot of consumer product companies, hospitality companies, a lot of other companies. So I'll plug that briefly. So I would like to see, I think the tent be broader. Mm-hmm. Exactly. But I think long term, I think this is all a culmination of all those years that we talked about. And, I really hope that the folks that are coming here realize that I don't think we necessarily want to be Silicon Valley 2.0 or anything. I think that we have a really interesting vibe and culture, and just how we have diversity in terms of our people. We have it in our industry, right? Look at the people on this panel right here, and this is just 3 of us. So I really do think that there's a lot that folks coming here can learn from talking to the different entrepreneurs. And lastly, I personally, as you know, I work in the environment and I pay attention to the broader issues. I really hope that the business community here uses this time, and we've had some great conversations to really, I think, push for the different challenges that Miami faces to be solved, because there are problems too, whether it's transit or affordability for our employees or ourselves. I mean, obviously environmental issues. So I think that these are also the business community's challenges, and more brains here mean more solutions for the problem. So that's what I would like to see at the end of this.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I'd echo Richard in terms of the new hashtag Miami Innovates or Miami Innovation. I don't know where the ecosystem as a whole will go. I know where we're going and what we're building towards. And on that note of what you said, Richard, I mean, building an inclusive innovation ecosystem, I think, is close to my heart and to many really smart, intelligent people who are working very hard in this ecosystem. And the reason why that's coming up so much is not because, diversity and inclusion is so relevant today and, on every headline. It's those things as well. But really what it is when you're in an ecosystem that's earlier on, you have more of a blank canvas to paint on.
Absolutely.
So we have a huge opportunity right now to make this an ecosystem that is inclusive, that is diverse, that incorporates innovation, commerce, tech, whatever it is, in a really thoughtful, intentional way, because we're at that stage. And so, at BrainStation, we're working really hard to do that within the things that we are doing in tech education and the partnerships that we have in the community. So, that is my hope for the future. And I mean, I gotta say, we're living through an amazing moment right now, and it really seems like anything is possible, and there's really great momentum.
Yeah, and creating a very strong, network and community. I think that is, key.
Yeah, and maintaining access to capital, to mentors, to talent, to education, all of those things.
So if anybody is interested in all of those, just reach out to Endeavor, and we'll be happy to include you in our network and connect you to any ecosystem partners that may support you. And that's what it's all about, right? Building this ecosystem and entrepreneurial innovation, connecting with the right people to help really catalyze that. So I think we have some questions from the audience. What have been key resources and individuals that have been critical to your growth? Who wants to take a shot at that? Felipe?
Well, I've always thought that hiring was the most important aspect of my business, because when you hire people that are committed, people that are willing to put the effort and have the skills, it's a different game, right? When you start a business like the one we started, where most of it is people, right? You have a little bit of technology and hosting costs, and most of the money goes in wages, right? So for me, the talent we hired was instrumental in order to scale the business and being able to deliver, good results with empowerment and with a good culture.
Culture, correct. Yeah. Okay, so, we have another question, unless anybody else wanted to say something. Okay. What's your advice for small startups in terms of key success factors and roadmap to reach that first $1 million in annual revenues? For example, in order to participate in programs like a scale-up program that Endeavor has, what would be those key advice?
I think that for
Good
us
question.
at least. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Joe.
No, go. I was just saying it's a good question.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think when it clicked for us was when we started really focusing on coming up with solutions to problems, not coming up with a solution and then looking for the problem, right? So I think that in our industry, it was really marrying, we started as an environmental company talking about the environment as an example, but we realized our customers' main motivation was financial. If we could reduce their utility costs, that was most of their motivation. And so we were actually relieving a pain point in terms of a financial pain point when our mission was to relieve an environmental pain point that we saw. And so making sure that we were aligning our approach with the problem they were feeling was really where we started to, it stopped feeling uphill every time we needed to make a sale. So that would be my best advice.
Yeah, I would say in the early days, you get really excited about like logos and websites and marketing. I guess it's the things you'd call events, the shiny things.
That's a great one.
And one of the things that we doubled down on, because my co-founder is also my husband and he had built a business before, he knew the importance of having a really strong financial backbone that started with an exceptional bookkeeper. So this is just like the most basic thing that I want to say is we kept meticulous records, not just in finance, but in everything. And it helped us throughout the whole process because we could rely on our numbers. Profitability is everything in the beginning. So, I know watching Silicon Valley, you see and if you're a tech company, this is great. Pre-revenue companies, we were a bricks and mortar educator. So we did not have the benefit of being like, we're pre-revenue, we had to be profitable. It was profitable or nothing, right? So I would say for us in the beginning to reach $1 million, it all came down to, yes, Felipe, having a great team. You need a great team who needs to who's willing to hustle, believes in the mission and the vision to get there. But then you got to be really close on your numbers. You have to know them, you have to know what's working, what's not, and you have to think strategically and critically if you need to make a pivot to become profitable or stay profitable. So I would say get that great bookkeeper, make sure you can trust those numbers.
Joe, don't tell Yuha. I did our books for years. Don't tell Yuha.
So did he.
I want to add just one quick thing as an answer to the question before. At some point, you're going to prove product market fit. You're going to say, look, this works and people are interested in buying this thing for this use case. Be focused on delivering on that use case at the beginning, because it's very common for startups to get distracted because they find anecdotal evidence. Oh, these people also want our product in this other segment, and then you are stretched too thin. So in our case, I think that keeping the focus on US K-12 was really instrumental, because we had the option of going international and higher ed and corporate training, but we thought that we had to keep the focus, and I think that was key to really expand and be experts in that use case.
That's wonderful advice, man.
Great
focus is so important. Yeah.
So our time is almost up. We have time for one more question. What has been one hidden secret in Miami that you hold dear to your heart? No business.
Family.
I have a few.
It has to be
Someone's
family.
willing to give their secrets.
It has to be the family that supports you along the way, at least for me.
Okay. How about what favorite outdoor activity do you like to do in Miami?
Well, I was going to say my hidden secret is definitely, I think we don't take advantage enough. This isn't that hidden of the water in this town, even though we're surrounded by it, whether that's, in the lockdowns, I was on my paddleboard in the bay, whether if you go down to Flamingo in the Everglades, you can actually beach hop around Florida. I think there's some really awesome stuff on the water you can do that people usually don't take advantage of.
Yeah, I was going to say literally exactly the same thing, Richard. To be on the water in Miami, you don't need a 100-foot yacht. You can actually get out there on a $100 paddleboard as well. And totally. I think that's the reason why we're attracting so many people as well, because people are finding the secret out so much. In between meetings, you can go out there and hit the paddleboard.
Definitely.
I've never managed that between meetings, to be honest.
No,
Joe, you're better than me.
I'm trying to make it sound easy.
I bought a kayak, an inflatable one, and I just started going to the bay here. So it was so much fun. I started seeing a lot of yellow kayaks, and I went to Amazon and just bought it.
Yeah.
So I think that's our time has come to an end. It's been so much fun to speak to all of you. Thank you for all the advice to the newcomers and entrepreneurs that are watching us today. And again, if anybody wants to connect with any of Felipe, Richard, or Joe and myself, just please connect through email or any of our social media, and we'll be happy to continue the conversation. So thank you so much, guys.
Thank
Good seeing you, my friend. Thank you.
Take care.